Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to one of CAST's free webinars. I'm Allison Posey and I'm thrilled to be your host today as we learn about journey mapping and thinking about how we can adapt journey mapping for our instructional planning. So as a quick intro, journey mapping is a technique that utilizes the powerful instruments of storytelling and visualization. And we think about this in terms of how we can design and plan in different contexts. So today we're going to hear from CAST staff, Kim Ducharme and Bill Wilmot, as they share how they've used journey mapping in so many really interesting contexts. And we hope that you'll find this tool to also be very helpful to help you plan for this fall. As we know, this is an unprecedented fall due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're thrilled to have you here today. And we want to make sure, if we could advance to the next slide, Kim, thank you. We want to make sure that we hear your voices in this conversation. So please contribute to the conversation. So for those of you who are here with us live today, thank you for being here. Welcome. And please feel free to open that chat panel in the center top of your Zoom window and choose all panelists and attendees if you want everyone to be able to hear your questions and your comments. And of course, you're free to just select panelists if it's something you think just we should know about. And we also recognize that some of you are going to be watching this recording and you may be, maybe 2 at night, 2 a.m., and you might be in your PJs with some ice cream. And we invite you, whether you're here now live with us or watching the recording, to share through Twitter. So you can use the @cast_UDL and the hashtag JourneyMapEDU to be able to share with us through Twitter. So please make sure to post your comments in the chat window, or thank you for entering those, Allie, into the chat box. And also, before we begin, I want to make sure to thank our captioner, Anne, who will be captioning. So please feel free to click the closed captions on your Zoom. It's on the bottom of your Zoom panel. And I want to thank Allie Berg for helping out with all of the technology and logistics. So this is part of the behind the scene crew. Also available, if we go to the next slide, please. We've created a digital handout for you all. This is a bit.ly that you can use. And what we've done is we've included all of our contact information. Kim, do you mind going to the next slide?
Not at all.
Thank you. All of our contact information, go back one more, is on that bit.ly, thank you. And any of the links that we mention or talk about in the slides are all available in this bit.ly, in this digital handout. And that's available to you all indefinitely, so please feel free to use this reference, use this digital handout at any point. And we'll make sure all those links are in there. We'll also make sure to put them in the chat box. So with those logistics, I'm just checking to see if there are any questions before we begin. Yes, this will be recorded and we'll post them to the CAST website and make sure that you're aware of when that comes out. And great, so without any further ado, I'm so honored to introduce my colleagues, Kim Ducharme, who's our Director of Educational User Experience Design here at CAST, and Bill Wilmot, who's an Implementation Specialist. So Kim and Bill, welcome.
Thank you so much, Allison. Excited to be here and share a little bit about journey mapping and for me, the amazing tool that it is and how it's shaped my thinking about how to pay attention to learners.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here as well. This is just fantastic. And I just want to do a shout out to Bill and the whole professional learning team because they have taken this tool and run with it. So you're about to see some really cool stuff we've been doing. Do you want to talk about our goal?
We learned from you, Kim. So, all right, credit is due there. All right, so goals for today. We're going to learn the basics of journey mapping. We're going to apply journey mapping to a classroom. We'll look at a classroom video and then use that tool immediately as a way of learning it. And then we're going to begin thinking about what are the implications for how we could use this tool in a variety of different contexts. So we are going to zoom into a context that everybody's thinking about right now. What does hybrid learning look like? And then how can we use journey mapping to support our planning around hybrid learning? So we would love to hear some of your goals. Throw them in the chat. You can put them on Twitter if you want to be really public about your goals, but I always encourage people to share their goals publicly. It's more likely that you're going to actively pursue them if you share them publicly. So take a minute. What are your questions and goals that you have coming into this, and throw those into the chat. So Kim.
And I'm sorry to just pause for just a moment. So for those of you raising your hand, please put your comments and questions in the chat box. We're not going to try to play with muting and unmuting, given to how large the webinars get to be. So please feel free. We'd love to hear your comments and your comments. So please put them in the chat box. Much appreciated. Back to you, Bill.
Thank you, Allison. So those are our goals for today. Kim, how are we going to accomplish those goals?
So we're going to do a few things together. First of all, we're going to give you sort of a high level, what is journey mapping, and then how we've taken it to apply it to educational contexts. Then together, we're actually going to create a journey map of a public speaking lesson that is face-to-face. Then we're going to think about adapting it to remote, mainly to hybrid settings, which includes remote. So, first of all, what is journey mapping? So a very quick overview. Basically, it's a user experience research artifact historically that utilizes storytelling and visualization to help designers understand user experiences and needs over time. So it was first used in the design industry as an artifact of research. Now, what are the typical parts of a journey map? This is one that we typically use. What you might see is a title at the top, a learning goal, then phases along the way, high-level phases. Very common elements of journey maps are activities, materials and tools, and back in service design, they're called touch points, like what are the devices you're using in an experience. A very common swim lane, if you will, which are the various rows here, is an emotion map. So what's going on inside of that learner or the person we are trying to understand and experience about, and why? Why might it be going on? Then thinking about barriers and opportunities, and finally, options for redesign. So these are just serving suggestions, right? You can use a journey map for all sorts of things. So what these labels are depends on your context. I would say the first few are very common: activities, materials, tools, learner, emotions. And then the rest are up to you. We'll often put our UDL lanes in there for multiple means of action, expression, representation, and engagement. But it all depends on your context. So.
Kim, can I say one thing about that?
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is that I'm hearing UDL already in barriers and options for redesign. So there's always that UDL in this particular map. That UDL thinking is already embedded in there.
Absolutely. Right, we take it for granted, but it's nice to be explicit. Okay, so here are a few examples of journey maps. They take all kinds of forms. They go from fairly simple journey maps. This one, as you notice, has 2 emotion lines. So that's interesting. You could do 2 students or a student and a teacher. This one's quite complex. This is the Rail Europe experience map. You can also see this map is circular. So they do come in all kind of shapes and sizes. So what have we done to adapt journey mapping to educational contexts? I'm from a design background, so a lot of the documentation and the chatter going on in my world is about the customers, and I take that word and I switch it out for learner, educator, and whatnot. And the light bulbs just really went on for me. It's like, why can't we use this tool in the context of journey, in the context of education? So how do we do that, and why? Typically, if we're doing it in the context of education, we can gain richer insights. We can capture that variability in the various swim lanes and the various facets we're thinking about for a complex experience that learning really is, right? It gives voice and agency to the research participants, and it's great for teacher, coach, and student reflection. And so those are just some of the ways that we use it. So what we want to do before we show you some of these is have you watch an actual journey map in session. So I'm going to stop sharing my, I'm not going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to exit the map, the slides, in order to show you a journey map that we did. And the context here is we were designing a digital math environment. We want to get more intel on the teacher's experience. So we're interviewing a teacher. Let me adjust my screen. There we go.
Journey mapping is a way of looking at the experiences of teachers and students in a time period to better understand where the successes and challenges happen. It helps us see patterns and reflect on the process. In this example, we're looking at a math unit on solving equations and polynomials and digging deeper into one of the lessons. First, we listed the student activities and materials and tools needed across the lesson. Then we identified a specific student that we wanted to follow through the course of the class. At each activity, we looked closely to identify the behavior and output of the student. We talked about the tasks and what the barriers were for that student. We discussed and annotated the perceived successes and challenges of that student. Next, we looked at the teacher's journey through the lesson. What were their perceived successes and challenges? We annotated those and looked across both teacher and student experiences. Observing the lesson at this micro level helped us see patterns and challenges that we may not have realized were there.
So there you go. That, in a nutshell, is journey mapping. All right, so here are a few of the ways that we have adapted it to educational context. So early on, when I was doing a design thinking workshop, it struck me that having the participants experience a circuits lesson and then using the tool as a way to identify inflection points and barriers and use those as jumping off points for brainstorming questions. How might we solve the problems going on here? We've also used it for product and curriculum design. Here is a tool that is a digital ecosystem. We are using it to think about the product as well as the lessons that go into the product. So here is start to finish what a student might go through in 1 hour class period. Now, note you're going to see very scrappy and polished examples here. This is scrappy, the whiteboard. One of our very first journey maps, I think. And here is that same ecology lesson on a 20,000 foot view, thinking about the curriculum. How does a lesson work? How does it work with other lessons? We use it for formal education, formative education research. We here we're getting teacher and student self-reflection in order to inform our design for the writing in digital writing environment. We have used it for our workforce development. We had both the youth build staff and youth sort of mapping out experiences to help design this app. We've used it in informal learning for a museum project called Productive Struggle, particularly having the students, the participants trying out piloted tools, having them recall what their experience was immediately after using it. we are looking forward to using it on a multi-gen makerspace program where the participants and the facilitators, the whole community is going to come together and create together.
And can I actually invite you to pause for just a moment, because there's a question that's come up a couple times and I think might help just to pause here as you're giving us all these ideas, and folks are wondering, is this done individually, in groups, by teachers with students? Could you just pause for a moment and share kind of who's in the room as your journey mapping?
Great. Actually, is this a picture of, you can't see it. Okay, so, right, so this one, so this workshop was all the participants were experiencing the lesson, and then we had print out, this very graphic was printed out and everybody was drawing right on there. So about groups of 4 were each playing the facilitator, the person experiencing the lesson, and the note taker. So those are 3 classic roles in this, and you will know more about that. Here we used it just internally because we had a lot of limitations as far as working with the incarcerated youth, but we were able to have the person that did go in to visit come back out and help us think about these kinds of experiences over time. So this would be 2 of us at a board. This is maybe 1 or 2 of us constructing and then talking with the whole team. The educational research was a sort of team of us researchers plus a couple of teachers, and then we went back and interviewed the students, and it was really interesting seeing their swim lanes and how they did and did not correlate to each other's assumptions on what was going on. Here, we talked both with staff and youth. So again, these, sometimes they're operating on it and sometimes we're sitting with the journey map and using it for talking points and making notes along the way. This one, each participant that went into the pilot exhibit came out of the exhibit and right away mapped their experience in a very simplistic, like beginning, 2 middle points and an end, but still it really helped with recall. We didn't want to interrupt them midstream, but we really wanted to get as close as possible to the recall of what they were feeling during this experience. We do a lot around the engagement and emotion with this project. This one is future thinking. We will be having, doing all sorts of the above explain examples. Bill, do you want to talk a little bit about how you've used these maps in professional learning?
And I'm sorry, before you do that, because we're at, again, this great pause point, I also want to note, someone asked, could you even use data from surveys or exit tickets? And I think that's a great way. You're basically trying to gather information from as many resources and humans as you can, as you heard Kim just give so many different examples.
That's really good. And classically, that is how they were being constructed, was just from all of those research artifacts. Now we try to get them right in with the conversation physically.
Which again just aligns so well with UDL and thinking about how to proactively.
And by the way, so we are flying through because we really want to get to the mapping part, and you can go back and pause the video and ponder these. And the links will be in the digital handout as well.
Yeah, so there are a couple of dimensions on which I think about how they vary. You can use journey maps proactively to do planning. You can do them reflectively to look back at something that's already happened. And you can kind of vary the degree and the way in which the learners or participants are involved in creating that journey map. So this particular one grew out of a lesson design studio. We co-designed a lesson with a group of 3rd grade teachers. One of them went and did the lesson. We all went and observed the lesson, and we shadowed one learner. And then each of the participants interviewed that learner for just 5 minutes at the end. And we came back and we journey mapped that lesson. We had all of the major points along the way, and then each person had one learner that they were responsible for mapping kind of the highs and lows, the learner emotion map for that one individual. So the next example, this is a great way of using it proactively for design. The teacher was creating a long 6-week project. She mapped out all of the major elements of that 6-week project. And then before the project even started, she brought that in to her classroom, and the students reviewed the project, and they identified their learner emotion map. And for their lows, they started participating in co-design of what, how could you, the teacher, support me? What could we build into the design that would help me through that low point? So it became a vehicle for students to participate in co-design, which was really powerful. This next example was a school that is opened a few days ago. It was a brand new school. They wanted to design with UDL and culturally responsive pedagogy in mind from the beginning. So we did a 2-day design workshop on what it would mean to design with UDL, to design a school with UDL in mind from the beginning. And we used a journey map to map out the first day of school. So we had, I think, 7 different groups, and they each created a map of the first day of school. They picked a learner that they knew well to map kind of the experience of that first day of school. So it became a common design tool that they could come back to and then take those 7 different visions and synthesize that into what they want their first day of school to look like. And then this final one from the professional learning context was one of my favorite. We used it proactively in designing a 2-day workshop. We laid out all of the activities, all of the materials, and we brought that to the workshop. And then we actually used it. It was on the wall for 2 days. We introduced it at the beginning, explained a little bit about journey mapping. And then we actually used it as the evaluation and feedback tool. We had people map their own experience through the 2 days, and then note on there, why was this a high, why was this a low, and what were some of the barriers that were getting in the way of their learning. So there we're getting immediate actionable feedback. It was the most actionable feedback and evaluation that I've ever had after professional learning, because you could really understand what the barriers were. And you're also modeling that idea of iterative feedback when you make it that explicit. So those are just some of the ways that we've used it in professional learning. And the more we get teachers doing it, the more we are encouraging them to get students involved in the process of mapping, because it's a very powerful experience. And it's a shift of perspective that teachers don't often have, that opportunity to just step back and interview a student or listen carefully or watch a student map what might be their highs and lows. All right.
Just wondering, before we jump in, if there are any pressing questions, I want to remind you to please put them in the chat box. And if you're having moments of, aha, this is a way I could use it, we would love to hear about that as well. So before we jump in and roll up our sleeves, I do just want to give everyone a collective breath, because that was a really exciting overview of all of these possible adaptations that could be used to with journey mapping.
Hey, Allison, that's a really good point. And I just want to encourage everybody, because we're going to ask you at the end as well, what if you have that aha moment, I could use this in such a way. Just make a note of it, put it in the chat, save it for the end. However, because we're really curious about how you can see using this. Thanks, Allison.
And Shannon, I like that idea of doing it pre and post, right? So you're doing it pre to plan, and then you're doing it post as a reflective activity.
So Bill, do you want to
all right,
get us started on the public speaking lesson?
Sounds good. So we are now going to roll up our sleeves. And we are going to learn journey mapping, the basics, by doing it. So a little bit of context on this lesson. This is the first lesson of a public speaking unit. The goal is really around focusing on audience and tone and word choice. So that's what the lesson is focused on. It's an 8th grade English language arts lesson. And then as you watch, just put yourself in the shoes of the learners in that room. What do you imagine that they're feeling? What's behind that? Why are they feeling that way? Feel free to put things in the chat as we go, but we'll have lots of time to kind of process all of that. So feel free to write it down on a piece of paper or a sticky note. I brought my sticky notes with me. I felt like I couldn't go to a Journey Map webinar without having sticky notes right nearby, or feel free to put it in the chat. So Kim, you are going to show us the video. Is that right? And so we'll get to see all of this lesson. It's about 9 minutes long. We'll watch the lesson and just be thinking from the learner's perspective, what do you imagine they're feeling?
Yeah, and we realize it's kind of luxurious, that long of a video, but it really is key to the mapping. So stick with it. Now let's cross your fingers.
On today, you got the This I Believe out, right? We're doing the 5-minute quick write about your feelings on public speaking in general, okay?
So we had done a project last quarter that they had to present for and speak publicly to a larger group, and I noticed a lot of kids were visibly anxious and afraid up there. So I thought, I have some time at the end of the year. Why not do a whole unit on public speaking?
Okay, so you guys can use your notebooks. You can pull up scrap paper up here, or you can type on your phones. Remember, if we're using our phones, it is for that purpose only, okay? And what I'd like you to do is just kind of summarize maybe your initial thought in a sentence and just share it with the person next to you, okay? Go ahead.
I like public speaking. It gives me a chance to share what I think to other people. I like public speaking, Emily.
Our public speaking unit, last one of the year, okay? It's going to be kind of quick, but hopefully we can get some, good practice in, good exposure. So it kind of leads me into why we're doing public speaking. All right?
This is a huge barrier for a lot of people. People I know, colleagues, even adults, it's very difficult for them to public speak. So I had to think about, okay, what are my expectations and what do I want them to be able to do, and how can I capture that? And what are the different ranges of difficulty and challenge in expressing themselves? So whether or not it's to a small group or just to me by myself, or not even, if that's like outside the box and not even give it to people, but put it on a video.
Okay, and I see some groans. So, in order to eliminate those groans and to eliminate those fears, we are going to get some goals that are geared towards us, right? Our individual needs, what we need to feel more comfortable going into this. So I have the following goals posted around the room. Think about your response to the bell ringer and comfort level with public speaking. Choose a goal that is, and I'm going to say realistic, yet challenging, something you can strive towards. And then you're going to pull one of the tabs. So if you look around the room, I have these things posted. Right, the first one, by the end of this unit, I will be able to deliver a speech in front of the whole class. That's kind of like that big step, big goal. Next one, by the end of the unit, I will be able to deliver a speech in front of a partner or small group. The third one, by the end of this unit, I will be able to deliver a speech to Mr. Costa. That is over on my chair. If you want to do that, you can pull a tab. So that's basically saying you're not comfortable in front of peers, but maybe in front of me you are. Then by the end of this unit, I will be able to deliver a speech on video. If you're not comfortable delivering a speech to people, right? If we're groaning about giving a speech publicly, things are changing nowadays. We have more technology. It could be possible to do a webinar, right, where you're giving a speech to people electronically. So if you want to do that one, you can come grab a tab there.
I chose small group. Sorry, what'd you do? The partner one. Yeah, it's easier to speak from a smaller group than bigger groups.
The goal of the lesson was to more or less zoom into tone and word choice, giving a speech, and considering the audience and, what tone and what word choice is going to best reach that audience.
Alrighty, I said I wrote my own This I Believe, so I'm going to share that. It's actually posted up on the board. But does anyone want a just kind of paper copy to follow along with?
So I wrote 2 versions of the same kind of speech with the same idea because I wanted students to first look at mine and look at my word choice,
All right, so I'm gonna
tone,
stand
and
over here. This is gonna
audience
be my
in
podium.
mind and think about how I changed it from speech to speech.
Options, help them self-regulate and allow them to set and accomplish challenging goals and objectives.
So the first one was more towards teachers, and it was much more in detailed and explained it more.
And I picked a 6-year-old audience to use an extreme, use hopefully an accessible extreme audience. Not all these learners are in the same place, and they might not all know the precise language for some of the things they're trying to get across, but so taking a more complex idea and simplifying it, I think would be a lot more accessible than taking a simple idea and making it as complex as you could.
Your first task, rewrite and share your This I Believe speech for a 6-year-old audience in mind. All right? If you do not want to do a 6-year-old, maybe you have no idea what a 6-year-old thinks or feels, you can pick another extreme, right? A grandparent, maybe the president, maybe you think back and you pick like a medieval knight or a caveman or something. You really got to explain it. I don't know, something extreme, but something that's gonna, so you don't just take your This I Believe and rewrite it, right? You have to rewrite it with that audience in mind, okay? So you can use the graphic organizer, or you can just kind of look at it and jot down on a regular piece of paper. I do have a digital copy on my PowerSchool Learning page if you guys want to use one of the laptops and do it digitally. Some more choices, you can share with the partner verbally, or you can record your speech and give it to them when you're getting feedback, okay? And lastly, I can be here if you want me to conference with you or look over some things. We all good so far? Any questions?
But how would you explain to accept everyone to a 6-year-old? Be nice to everyone. Yeah, that's one way, but how do you feel vulnerable?
And if you swap,
What would happen if I swap?
if you swap those, oh
really
my God.
make a bad impression to the Board of Education. Wait.
So once they were done self-assessing and taking a step back and looking at their own work, they were to deliver the speech with a variety of options to a partner.
Everybody knows that all kids need to go to school, but not all kids are given good lunches. The school lunches in America are not good for you. Being nice to everyone makes you and everyone around you seem nice, like a good person. Being nice is something to own it and be proud of it.
Every day you have to wake up at 5 in the morning to go to school, but during snack time you're so tired that you fall asleep and miss a lot of good information. What do you do then? Every school should start later and let kids sleep in because kids wouldn't need
I think that you did use words that the audience can understand and would find interesting. And you did use words that will capture their attention, but you repeated yourself a lot.
I did, yeah. I said
So
Santa Claus
I don't know if
5
they...
times.
I feel like they would kind of stop listening.
To use a tone that demonstrates respect for and knowledge of the audience. Yes, because you show that you know the knowledge of it too. Okay, so it was good. Thank you. And then to end it, I think you could probably just have one closing sentence to wrap it up and then be done.
Yeah. Just keep it short because the attention span is short.
All right, so on a Post-it or a sticky note, tell me which unit goal, right? When you took the tab, the bigger goal for the end of the unit, which one you did and why. So kind of like the conversation you had with the partner in your group. And then you're going to post it in a specific place on the stoplight. So post it on green if you think you're ready for that goal today. It's very likely you're probably not, but it's okay if you are, and it's great if you are. You're going to put it on yellow if you're not sure if you're ready. You're kind of getting there, but you could still use some practice. Or red if you're totally, definitely not ready to kind of meet that goal.
what we would do after this lesson is not only finish our work from today, but look at the smaller minutia of public speaking. So we have those ideas and we have those concepts, but now looking at, okay, eye contact, pacing, projection, and all those things are important when you're delivering a speech, because if you have something you believe and something strong, but they can't hear it, or they can't hear it, it's not going to reach the audience. So.
Okay. All right. So, I should have left that up. So here we are. Sorry, I'm trying to recover now. I don't see where to share. I think I need to stop sharing for a moment, sorry.
So as Kim's doing that, it was great to see you all thinking about at what point, you know, how learners might be feeling at different points in the lesson and what some of those different points are. So thank you for putting those ideas in the chat.
The other thing I saw in the chat, Allison, that I really liked is people beginning to think about the interaction between how learners are feeling going into it and the design of the lesson, and how the design of the lesson may have influenced how they were feeling initially.
And your head may have also been going to, and now we are adapting these lessons for hybrid. So know that that is coming in a moment. So you may have already started going there. I already couldn't help but to think that when I heard the teacher mention one of the options is delivering a webinar, and thinking, yes, that is largely the main way they're doing it now.
Awesome. Okay, so here we go. First, let me tell you a little bit about what we'll do together. Basically, we'll keep it to 4 stages. We'll think about the lesson goal and mainly the activities that you saw. We will then map the learner emotions. We'll identify barriers together and opportunities, and we'll brainstorm a few solutions. We're not going to get it all the way through, but you're going to get your feet wet for sure. Sorry, one moment. I need to go in and out. So what I'm going to do is, so here we are in the first phase, looking at the activity. So here is the journey map. And boy, I wonder, how do I share this full screen? That sure would be nice, wouldn't it? I don't think I'm going to be able to. All right, that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in and out so you can see, read everything. But first I want to give you a very high level view. So this is the public speaking journey map. We did a little bit of it so that we could, for the sake of expediency. So what we're going to do first is model how that works by, I'm going to play the facilitator. Bill is going to be the instructor, and Allison is going to be the note taker. And that is a very challenging task. So she's got stickies on the side ready to go, and she's going to place them as we talk. And so just to zoom in, here you see the title, the goal, the phases, and the activities and material. So we're going to focus right now on the activities until we've got everything from the bell ringer through 9, which is where the students give each other feedback and options. So, Bill, what happens next after that?
So after they gave each other feedback, they had to go back and revise their "this I believe" statement based on that feedback. So revision and rewrite was the next step.
Right. And then, so is that the end of the share and revise phase?
Yeah, so then they were kind of creating a final version that they would either share with a partner, that they would record, or that they would turn into the teacher in some ways. They had different options for how to turn that into the teacher. So the final performance was the next one.
Okay, and then what happens?
So then the whole purpose of doing this was to think about who the audience was for their this I believe statement? Who did they really want to hear this statement? So they had to identify who their final audience was that they wanted to rewrite it for.
Okay. And what was next?
So then they did the final writing part was that they had to rewrite with that ultimate audience in mind.
Okay. And then is at the end of that phase?
Yeah, so that's the end of that phase. And then we went into the stoplight reflection at the end where they went back to the unit goal. They reminded themselves what that unit goal was, why they chose it. And then they did a quick little self-assessment. Green means they met it. Yellow means maybe they're there, not quite there. And red means they're not ready yet.
Okay. So let's think, were there any other materials or resources that were involved? There's some earlier on, but we don't have any. Would you add anything to this?
Just that stoplight material. And can you zoom in a little bit on the end there, just so we can see what's new there?
Yeah. So Allison has added, starting here, she's added several new activities, and now she's adding a material, related material to that reflection phase. Great. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to zoom out. And so just one other thing to point out, that the note-taking is quite challenging, as you may have guessed that we had things at the ready, but typically the note-taker is so crucial for paraphrasing what the participant is recounting, and they can often paraphrase back as a way to jog their thinking even further or to clarify. So that's really key. So that would normally be happening as well. So
Kim,
now,
can I say one thing about kind of this three-way way of doing it, where there's a facilitator, instructor, and note taker? It's a really valuable way of getting the instructor to kind of zoom into what actually happened, like what from moment to moment, what was actually going on. So I find it when you're doing it, when you have the opportunity, the luxury really of doing it with 3 people like that, it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Now what we're going to do is think about the next step, which is mapping the learner emotions. Well, how might we do that though? That's kind of difficult. In a perfect world, you would be asking the students. Well, we happen to have some videos of the students recounting their experience. So that's great. So that's what we're going to do today. And then we'll move on to mapping those along that engagement emotion line. So we're just going to look at the first student, and I'm going to get that started, make sure my captions are on.
So as you're listening for this,
When Mr. Costa told me about like the public.
Yes.
Sorry, as you're listening to this, I would just prime people to think about what are you hearing? What are the emotional highs and lows for this particular learner? Kind of go into it with that question in mind.
Yes.
Public speaking unit, I kind of like panicked a little bit, like, because I don't really like public speaking a lot, because like we did this project and I had like kind of like a panic attack. I got like really dizzy and like couldn't speak. Started breathing really weird. I liked the lesson because it kind of like helped us learn how to speak to certain people. Like usually we don't talk to our grandparents a certain way that we talk the same to our brothers or like friends. And the lesson kind of helped us like learn how to talk to certain people, sort of. Well, usually in public speaking, we have to try to connect to the audience and like try to get them to keep on listening without like dozing off and stuff. I liked the first part of the lesson because it kind of helped us like identify what certain groups like to hear. Like we don't use like super complex like ideas and sentences to like
talk to people who might not understand it, or well, the this I believe statement was about like global warming and like how like it's a problem, and so I tried to like focus it on things that 6-year-olds would usually like. Usually like little kids like animals and stuff like penguins and polar bears, and since the ice caps are melting because of the like rising temperatures, I wanted to like say like some of these animals might be in danger and stuff like that. I feel like people who create new technology.
Okay, I'm going to zoom ahead a little bit.
I like how we got to choose like our own topic and audience and stuff, because we got to either challenge ourselves or choose stuff that we had interest in, instead of like in 5th grade we had to write an article about why they should keep chocolate milk. That didn't do much for me. When I had to choose like who I was like speaking to, I chose a partner, but I had to choose somebody I already knew, so because I wouldn't want to talk to a random person that I didn't really know about polar bears and penguins. I kind of liked how they had the tickets on the wall and who you got to choose between, because if I spoke in front of the whole class, once again, I wouldn't like that, and I don't really like talking to teachers like to them when I'm reading something, because it kind of sounds, they're a little bit more scary because they have more power than like the students. But like I chose the one where you had to talk to like a small group of people or a partner, because I knew the person I was talking to. I knew they wouldn't like kind of give me weird looks. I don't know. Like if I was reading something that I didn't write very well. We separate.
Let's stop there and go to the journey map. Now we're going to be swapping roles a little bit. Now Bill is going to be the facilitator and you are the instructor. And I'm going to be a note taker.
Okay, so we are going to be looking at the learner emotion map and start creating an emotion map for this learner, Henry. And we often start this by working to identify kind of the highest highs and the lowest lows for him in within this learning experience. So does anybody have something that they would nominate as a highest high or lowest low during his experience of this lesson? So Lee is saying one of the lows was the panic when he even heard the words public speaking unit. So any other things that folks would nominate as low points or high? Okay, and thank you. So Mary Margaret is identifying high is getting a choice in his work. And Shannon, same thing. One of the things I heard was choice of the topic was important to him.
Bill, would you mind identifying numbers for me, because I'm just having a hard time seeing.
Yeah, so the public speaking, learning that it was a public speaking unit is kind of maybe even before number 1, right? It's maybe not even on the map yet.
Yeah.
And say just a word more, somebody in the chat, think about why is that the lowest low for him? Do we have any predictions just based on how he was, what he was talking about in that interview? Right, so scared of getting weird looks, there was self-doubt. He talked about having a previous experience where he described it as a panic attack when he had to speak in front of people.
Okay, great, thanks.
Boris is bringing up an interesting point. Can you go deeper with emotions? When you say high or regarding positive emotions or stronger emotions, I often leave those vague, high and low, so that people can kind of define it based on what they're hearing from the people experiencing it, the participants, and then fill in some of that detail in that purple sticky note that Kim just put on there. Can you zoom in one more click on that so we can see what you put on that sticky note? So scared of getting weird looks, self-doubt, panic attack. So there we're really giving the color to it. That's the why is that a low point, and gives us more kind of detail on the emotion.
That's right, but that is an excellent question. And sometimes we will give multiple dimensions to this swim lane, if you will, where you can think about your energy level as one dimension, your sort of attitude or feeling. You know, there are all sorts of things you can tease out of this. Once we took the map from the Yale, oh gosh, now I'm not going to.
The mood meter.
Is it the mood meter? So
Yeah.
those 4 quadrants, and we actually did quadrant mapping all along the way. So there's lots you can do with this. So that's good. So we had a second low around choice.
Well, that was actually, so the choice of topic was a high because the quote I remember from the video is, one time we had to do a thing on why we should keep chocolate milk. That didn't do anything for me. So he was glad that he could talk about a topic, global warming, that really mattered to him.
So is that here?
Yeah, I guess so. Right, so they on 2, they're deciding to keep the topic that they had from yesterday or change it. So that would be one place we could put it. And then there was another comment in there about having a choice of audience that they were going to get feedback from.
Is that good or bad?
That was a good.
Okay. Don't want to assume anything. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I want to make one point. So Bill is asking you about what you imagine to be their highest highs and lowest lows. The reason we start there, besides running out of time, is because that way you can scale the rest of the emotions you want to map. So that otherwise we start going off the charts, you know, up and down here. So I guess the question is, are these the highest highs and the lowest lows? And is there any other along the way here that you might feel are important points to map in rewriting, sharing, performing, rewrite? How are people going to feel performing? How is Henry going to feel performing? Or what might be positive and negative for him?
There's a part of the interview, Kim, that we didn't have time to watch where he talks about the process of writing versus the process of delivering the speech. And he really identifies delivering the speech as a low. And that's kind of later on when on number 7, where he has to deliver the speech. The process of writing he actually enjoyed.
And there were some of you noted that, which was a really astute observation. Yeah, it's really that performance piece.
Would that be here, Bill?
It was at 7, so the beginning of that share and revise section.
I accidentally, this is a hazard of the tool, I accidentally deleted it. Okay, so here.
That happens.
Okay.
So then the other nuance to that, though, was that he felt much better in being able to choose a partner rather than perform before the whole group. But just even the process of choosing a partner seemed fraught because he had to have just the right partner. He didn't want to, he didn't want to do just in front of anybody, talk about polar bears and penguins. It had to be just the right person.
Okay, and where would you like me to put that guy?
Well, it can go also there under 7, right? It was
oh, so
part of the complexity.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is do a second post-it because sometimes let me do it. Let me just say that sometimes you will have multiple dots on a single single point in time because, right, our emotions are complex. I feel great about this, but horrible about this other thing. So those can also be mapped. So, is there anything, so Bill, you're more familiar with this lesson. Besides the highs and the lows, are there any noteworthy things to map on this?
The one other thing that I remember from the video, he mentions that he has a little brother. So he thinks about that idea of rewriting for a 6-year-old. He thinks about that in the context of how would I communicate with my little brother. So he doesn't identify it as a high, but it seems like that would go under number 5, where the teacher explains the task and to rewrite for a 6-year-old. That he feels confident about that task because he has a context for understanding it.
Okay, but maybe around here.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the sake of time, let's press pause. So what we have here is this one, the note was about the brother. I would ask for clarification. I would make sure that was clear, but let's just do that.
Oh, for sure.
So what we would do would be to continue on the experience of noting the emotion, and then we kind of want to connect the dots. So I'm just going to do that really quick here. So what we have is the beginning of an experience, a beginning of a story going on, right? Next, what we want to do, and I'm going to color this orange, and that's because it's associated with Kevin. So now what we want to do is think about these points in time, these highs and lows, and what are the barriers or opportunities for learner independence here? What are some ideas there? And Bill, I'll let you, I'll again play the note taker.
Great. So I'd love to throw that up to the group. So thinking about that typical UDL frame of the barrier is in the environment or the barrier is in the learning experience, what do we identify as some of the barriers that correspond with those lows, right? The first low was around learning that we were doing a public speaking unit, and the second one was around actually delivering the speech. Any ideas on barriers for those 2 moments? Yeah, so Tamara, I saw you pointed out this out earlier. He was worried about the power of the teacher versus his partner. It felt less threatening to talk to his partner, but didn't want to talk with polar bears and penguins to just anyone. So there was the act of sharing his thoughts out loud was a bit of a barrier.
Okay. So that goes here, right?
Yeah.
Over.
And then Lauren is pointing out the challenging past experiences are probably related to both, but delivering the speech.
Say it again, challenging past.
Past experiences, so prior experience with public speaking. How safe the classroom feels, and especially in this case, it feels like safety from being judged.
Okay, great. So now, for the sake of time, let's think about, so just to say a little bit about the positive moments can also be their opportunities, right? If this is a strength for Henry, how might we go with that and put more of that into his experience? So what now we want to do.
And I think, Kim, in that context, especially, this is a topic that he really cares about, right? So how do we, that's a that could lead us to think, well, how could we leverage that? This is a topic he really cares about. And in this case, we're using that topic he really cares about to support his learning around a skill that he really struggles with, public speaking.
Okay, great. So, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with the barriers?
Yeah, so as we're thinking about those barriers, are there things that you could imagine in the design? What would we add to the design? What options would we build in? Are there scaffolds that we would put in place to support Henry in entering into this learning in a different way?
Right.
So feel free to throw things in the chat there. Options that we would use. This is where we pull out our UDL guidelines and start looking at that engagement column, because there are definitely engagement barriers built into this. I would go straight to recruiting interest. One of the things that is built in, yeah, so recommend further readings or on breathing techniques. So even ways specifically building in supports to manage that those emotional reactions. I would go straight to the recruiting interest guideline. And one thing that's already built in there is a choice of content, of relevant content that the learner sees as valuable. Working with peers that he trusts. So finding a way to communicate from the beginning that that's going to be an option, that he'll be able to work with peers he trusts. And Allison is reminding us that getting feedback along the way can kind of support that. That's built into the design too.
Sorry, I didn't catch that one.
Feedback, opportunities for feedback. And then guided visualization, so another technique for managing emotion.
Okay, and these are sort of general.
Yeah, so a lot of these do feel like they could be, have to be in place in the classroom environment up front. What about that specific barrier of he is worried about delivering the speech? It is a public speaking unit. And so are there ways that we could kind of create an environment, help create an environment that's going to be where he may be less nervous about that? Oh, Tamara just put something in of developing a set of norms and class set of rules around how we respond to speaking. That might make it
oh, that's good.
Positive, positive environment for him to deliver his speech.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
And an added to have the students develop, co-develop those norms.
Absolutely, that's great.
All right.
So
we are running short on time. Kim, can we have to move on, but
yes.
Can we hear just the first 20 seconds of the other learner? Because we'll get a very clear sense of how you could use this with two different learners.
Okay, is that at minute 2:20 or at the minute
start,
0?
Yeah, start right at 0 and give us the first 20 seconds.
Okay.
When Mr. Costa first told us about public speaking, I was really excited because personally I like speaking in front of people. I don't really know why. I guess it's kind of because I like sharing my opinion, but I just was really excited to be able to do something more with it than just small projects and presentations. I used to think that word choice wasn't as big of a deal, but now I know that.
Okay.
So there we can see kind of shining through the variability of learners, right? And that the learner emotion map for that one is going to look very different than Henry. And in fact, there are so many opportunities to use this tool for looking at the wide variety of learner experiences. So both of these, we have one boy, we have one girl. Both of these learners are white. It seems like their primary language is English. So they don't have any of the other barriers that may come along with, as we look at kind of the lens of race, of English, learning English as a second language, all of these kinds of things, which add, which, you know, the racism adds another layer of barrier to this. So it can be a tool for really digging into kind of the variability of the classroom and the learners in front of you. And what's interesting is once you map that, you can see that. You can see that this person's high is the same moment as that person's low, and then begin to think about how do we design for all of those learners.
Right, absolutely.
All right, so we are going to dive into thinking about how would we adapt this public speaking lesson, this very lesson, for hybrid setting. So this is the new world we're living in. James Costa fantasized, oh, you might even do a webinar. Well, now we're doing webinars. So let's imagine that hybrid learning for us means that we have 2 days in person and we have 3 days remote. And what we are going to do is use this to really look carefully and critically at what would we want to prioritize? What do we want to do in person for sure? And what are things that could happen remotely in a variety of different ways, either synchronously or asynchronously? Kim is going to tell us one slight difference in the process, and then we're going to dive in.
Right. So since we've already mapped the activities, we want to think this time about that. What might you optimize for face-to-face versus remote activities? What are the affordances? What are the issues that are going to be coming up for the students that you've mapped? As well as, oftentimes we'll map the instructor as well. Not today, but that's a really, really handy thing to do as well.
Okay. All right, so let's just watch as Kim is going to magically transform this journey map. She's going to add additional swim lane here for remote. So that top lane will be our in-person activities, and then she's going to add a remote lane, and we're already getting nominations for things to go in the remote lane. Part of this is just marveling at how easily Kim manages Google Docs.
Okay, so
right.
what do we want to move the dial on here?
So one of the nominations for remote from Mary Margaret is when students write their speeches. So not the best use of the time in the classroom to rewrite the speeches if you have a limited amount of time together. So
Step 3.
That is, let's see. Six, yeah, kind of 6 is
right, rewriting.
6 is the rewrite.
Okay, so that's better for remote, or
yeah,
it's a candidate, right? Let's just give it a slightly different color. Okay.
And then one of the nominees to stay in person is the feedback from the partners. So keep that in person. That's 9. So we want to keep 9. Keep
so
9 as
what I'm going to do is just outline it so that we know that it's one we've identified as good for.
All right, other nominations. What are other things that could happen remotely just as easily as they happen in person?
Make changes.
Yeah, I think 10 is similar to 6, right? So to take that feedback and then go make changes, that could probably happen remotely as well. Throw ideas in the chat as you think of them.
How about this, 12?
Okay, so Gary is saying that number 7, which is once they've made changes, delivering their statement, that could happen in breakout rooms in Zoom.
Ooh, where does
So
that
that's
go?
another layer of fanciness. So that's synchronous, remote in breakout rooms.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna say, good.
And then similarly, Lauren is suggesting that 11, that final performance to turn in, could also happen remotely via video. So students could make a video of their final performance to turn into teacher.
Absolutely, and they could do it. Could some of these
TED Talk style, she said.
choice? Like,
Yeah,
could this be both?
Sure, right. If people wanted to perform for the whole class
Right,
when they were in person, they could set aside to do a day
Yeah,
to do that.
silver lining. These COVID silver linings, I'm telling you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's.
And the goal stays the same, as Allison points out, for both of those. It's a final presentation.
Right.
One of the moments that I'm looking to see where it is. Well, it's kind of when he explains the task, but it's not really even represented here. When he delivers 2 different speeches, and they are trying to identify the audience, that's something that could also happen remote. He could do 2 videos, and they're looking at that from remotely and identifying, and then the conversation about that could be live and in person. Now we're really starting to redesign the lesson. Yeah, so Teresa is identifying that on 12, they will choose the audience that they think most needs to hear this, their this I believe statement. That could be a remote activity.
Okay, hold on.
You can see, as Kim was saying earlier, the note taker has the hardest job of anyone in this, just keeping up.
And as you can see, as long as I put this a little bit after this one, I can kind of keep it. I keep track of when things are happening, so that's okay.
It's a big meta moment that this journey mapping is often done face to face, and here we are doing it remotely. So it's a great meta example that we could think about.
Right. Thank you, Allison.
It is, yes. I've done this so much now virtually that's hard to remember that these journey maps are large pieces of paper on the wall with sticky notes that we're moving around.
Yes,
huge. It's in some ways a very different experience doing it this way.
Right. In fact, right before the first conference got canceled, I was headed to South by Southwest with a big tube that I was trying to figure out how to get on the airplane. Right. Of our big butcher paper that we do our fun, gigantic journey maps on. Anything from the front end here? Okay.
Yeah, I think number 3 there, identifying the audience that they want to rewrite for. And even a lot of the kind of the pieces of the lesson could be shared with students. He even said it, he had it all on a Power School Learning page, could be shared with students on a digital platform so that they could kind of orient to the task before they even started it.
I'm going to put that one down here.
Oh yeah, we're adding materials.
Yeah. So, pieces of the lesson. Available digitally?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Sorry.
Yeah.
The thing about being quick with this tool is that it shuts down the other part of my brain. So, okay. So, here we go. so you could think again, go back through and think about the materials, the resources, the tools there.
Yeah.
But for the sake of time, it might be that we want to.
So just thinking about this one learner, Henry, that we've mapped most thoroughly, would anything change? So in this new hybrid version, right, several of the tasks have now become things that you do at home, either asynchronously or synchronously on Zoom and breakout rooms. What would change for Henry? Do we think any of these, what are currently highs, would drop lower, or would any of the lows become a more pleasant, engaging experience for him?
Mm-hmm.
So Henry, Michael's suggesting Henry might have more confidence in that environment.
Yeah.
The one that I'm, the one that I'm thinking of in particular is he starts at this very low of about public speaking. But if he has time to really understand what the unit is and what the lesson is by reviewing it on the PowerSchool Learning page, then he might see that some of those options are built in, and might not start in such a difficult place. Yeah, so Teresa's saying it might be less stress in the home environment. Interesting. So listeners could turn off their cameras to decrease fear in the speaker, for the speakers. So that could be an option that we shared with learners, right? If we wanted everybody to present to a live audience for whatever reason, the speaker might have the option of saying, I want everybody to turn off their cameras, and they could do it that way.
Ah, okay.
The dynamic around Zoom cameras is so fascinating to pay attention to, and to think about what are the barriers that may be leading to people turning off their cameras. So that's the first time I've heard here's a positive use for turning off cameras.
Absolutely.
Most of the time people are complaining about students turning off cameras.
And so all three of these notes are corresponding to this new dot where he is actually coming, moving up. Now, obviously, we could think about Amelia's experience as well, but we won't do that for the sake of time, and a lot of other student experiences, right?
Yeah.
What else would you like to do with this map?
Any other changes that people would imagine happening in this learner emotion map from the necessary hybrid redesign?
Do we want to look at barriers, new barriers? Well, so I was thinking for Amelia, it might introduce a new barrier for her because she's so excited about public speaking, and maybe she gets a charge out of the social aspect.
Right. So just zoom into that, Amelia, you have her at the top left, learner emotion map. She's excited about public speaking.
She's here, right?
Yeah.
Is this delivering a speech?
Yeah, exactly.
So she would go from here maybe and move down maybe here. I mean, it probably wouldn't be a big negative for her, but sure wouldn't be a really big high.
Yeah. One of the things that she says in that interview, which is so interesting, that she thinks about that process of delivering it very differently than Henry does. She says, what I love about delivering it to an audience is that I'm getting immediate feedback on the content of my speech, so I can improve the speech based on the reactions that I'm getting or not getting from an audience. So she's really using it to kind of try out the content of her speech and revise the content. So that's a key piece of the feedback loop for her.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Nice. So I think we're getting the idea here.
Yeah.
What else?
Another interesting option that came up that Carrie brought up in the chat was making it so that students don't have to see themselves when they're presenting. Right. So turning off an option to turn off the Zoom. And then the feedback question leads me to, this is where it gets really interesting, where you're looking at 2 learners or 10 learners on one of these maps, is that idea of getting feedback, that's a real high for Amelia. That's an essential part of her learning process. And delivering the speech is a low for Henry. So how do we design that feedback process that it's going to work in a way that it's going to work for both? So one earlier comment, Gary said they could get feedback through a Google Doc. And that seems like that might be a good way for Henry to get feedback. But it doesn't accomplish the same goal as Amelia is looking for, where she's looking for the reaction. So having different ways to get that feedback. So through a Google Doc, or through live and in person, or in a Zoom breakout room.
And Bill and Kim, one thing I want to note too that's super exciting from a UDL perspective is that we're still keeping the goal high. We're focusing in on, really developing the audience and the tone and the speech toward that, whether we're remote, hybrid, or face-to-face, and having to keep coming back to that is really satisfying for me.
Thank you for pointing that out, Allison. That is, it's very important to keep sight of that.
And we do only have about 7 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we're able to take a few moments for reflection and to hear from you some of the ideas of application that are hopefully coming into mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back here and bring it up. Yeah, so a couple of things we're curious about, and you might have other reflections, but how does this support you to think about in-person versus hybrid or remote learning? Can you imagine this tool is valuable for supporting all students or a variety of students? And one of our research questions is how this is being used. So what light bulbs went on for you as far as applications for your own work?
So feel free to throw things in the chat or reflect on Twitter, #JourneyMapEDU, and you can tag CAST in there. But what are some of the reflections, thoughts about how this influences your thinking when you're thinking through a lesson or through this in-person versus remote learning? Yes. So Michael is talking about using it to think about effective PD for staff, and even helping and using kind of that learner emotion idea to help them kind of take stock of where their emotions are. There are so many emotions walking into the beginning of this year. That we debated in the hybrid scenario, even adding a teacher emotion lane, just to think about what are the ups and downs for teachers as they're beginning this school year.
Right. Yeah, so what new swim lanes? Here's another reflection.
Yeah, there's another good reflection.
What swim lanes would you add? What are yours?
Yeah, and one of my colleagues, Susan, always says it as, the swim lanes are kind of a question that you're curious about, that you really want to investigate. Yeah, we have to be finding ways to support teachers' emotions this year. Tracking them paying attention to them is kind of step one of that. So Teresa is mentioning all of the online tools that would be necessary to do this hybrid learning. that teachers may or may not know about, right?
And
so this is...
Yes, Teresa, I would make that a swim lane, absolutely. And in the original versions, that was kind of thought of as touch points to the experience. That's a great one.
Yeah, and that's a really productive way to use that materials and tools lane is just, all right, what do we need? What are we paying? What tools are we, do we need for this? I think of it, I taught chemistry, and setting up for a chemistry lab, I would have loved to have a journey map, because then I could actually map out, these are all of the materials that I need.
Yeah. So I'm even going to say that would go is a new swim lane here. Technology, support. I'm going to add it. Great. And by the way, we will be taking a screenshot of this artifact to put into the digital handout so that we have a record of what we all created.
Yeah. So Shannon brings up the point that if you use this proactively at the beginning of PD for staff, you really have to pay attention to it. You have to be flexible and be willing to pivot with the overall content, right? And be willing to, and that's another, along the same lines of what Allison was saying, really forces us to be clear about our goal. If we're clear about our goal, put that up at the top of the journey map, and then be flexible about all the different ways that we could imagine teachers getting to that goal.
Right, that's great.
So Kim, if you, we'll pull the slides back up. We do invite you to continue, to continue to put your reflections in the chat. And we want to, again, I know we keep saying this, but we have all of these great resources available in the digital handout. There are instructions, some of you noted, could be an opportunity for group work. And yes, the instructions actually map out the different roles. We have templates in there, a blank journey map. There's one that highlights the UDL guidelines. There was a question in there noting, could we also do this for representation and action and expression? And then there's a spreadsheet style journey map and a Smaply tool. So Kim and Bill, do you want to just quickly share anything else about these, the robust set of tools and resources that are in our digital handout?
Oh, just to say that the DIY instructions are really, you can do this. It's really step by step and gives you all sorts of thinking points around the materials, how much time, what the roles are, etc. So go for it.
The other thing I would say about the DIY is this is very scalable, right? You can do a 3-hour version of this. You can do a 5-minute version of this. And it's certainly not something that we would expect somebody to use every time they're planning, but it's a very kind of robust tool for planning and reflection, and very scalable.
Great. Thank you. And on the next slide, I'll just share a couple things. We do hope that you share with us how you're using this tool. Kim, I'm actually going to let you say this.
What, go forth and report?
Yes, I love it.
Yes, so one of my favorite journey maps is a really simple one that a teacher tweeted back to me, like a month or two later, and it was just such a wonderful example. And so please let us know how you're using these. Yeah, using the hashtag JourneyMapEDU.
And I appreciate some of you are already making note, that this is making UDL more salient, connecting the UDL framework. You're thinking about this as an opportunity to work with different teachers to collaborate on struggling students and behaviors and what's causing behaviors, which is just fabulous. And the last couple pieces, they're not last but least, but these are last, but also some very exciting things. We have a new book coming out from Cass Professional Publishing called Anti-Racism and Universal Design for Learning, Building Expressways to Success by Tesha Fitzgerald. And you can use this code JourneyMap20 and save 20% on the purchases through September 18th. It is a must read. This is a really important book. So we invite you to take advantage of this, this discounted opportunity for this book. And we do invite you to stay in touch with us. All of the exciting things going on with CAST, with our research team, with our design team, with our professional learning team. You can keep up to date with our CAST newsletter. And also importantly, if you like this webinar, if you didn't like this webinar, if you have topics that you want to make sure we cover, please give us some feedback. We have this survey where you can share thoughts on this one and share ideas for ones that you would like to hear in the future. So we want to thank you all for being with us today. Thank you again to the team for being here. Kim and Bill, thank you for sharing your experience and all of these really imaginative, important ways to implement journey mapping. And we hope that it's a helpful tool for folks as you go into this unprecedented fall.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. It's wonderful.
Thank you all. Very excited to see what you come up with.
Yes, indeed. All right.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you all.